Ever knocked on a stranger's door and walked into something you never wanted to leave? The door opened before I could knock a second time, and I stepped through the door and saw them talking by the fireplace. The fire behind them glowed low, quiet, steady. I told myself I'd just step inside to get out of the cold, but I didn't check the forecast before coming. They looked over and nodded as I came inside. If you've been here before, you know the drill. Go ahead and like and subscribe. It really does help more than you'd think. And if this is your first time, well, it's a good one to start with. Thanks for being here. Now, let's begin. Rain had already soaked through my sleeves by the time I stepped onto the porch. My hair clung to my neck, and the beam from my flashlight had gone dim halfway up the gravel path. I knocked once, then again harder, my knuckles stiff from the cold. The door opened with a low creak. Firelight spilled out first, flickering across thick wood floors and the hem of a flannel shirt. Eli stood in the frame, tall, silver-streaked. His voice was just as steady. "You must be freezing," he said. "Come in just for a bit." I hesitated, water still dripping from my elbows, but I stepped inside. The warmth hit first, a rush of fire heat, soft rugs under my shoes, and something deeper. Quiet music, the kind that hummed instead of played. I barely had time to scan the room before another figure stepped around the couch. Marco was broad and bearded, a wool-knit sweater across his chest, and a faint scent of pine when he moved. "Let me grab you something," he said, already lifting a blanket from the armrest. I stood still as he wrapped it over my shoulders, the fabric heavy and warm, tugging at the curve of my neck. My fingers tightened at the edge. "I'll make tea," came a quiet voice. I turned. Jonah was younger, mid-30s maybe. Lean, quiet, with a tattoo just visible beneath the collar of his Henley. He didn't smile, just met my eyes and nodded once before moving toward the kitchen. I hadn't spoken yet. My throat was dry, my legs shaky from the walk, but I didn't ask how long the storm would last because I didn't really want to know. I followed the sound of Jonah's footsteps across the wood floor, still clutching the blanket at my chest. The fire had settled to a steady glow, casting waves of amber over the couch and the wide armchair beside it. Marco stepped past me and crouched by the hearth, poking at the embers until the flames brightened again. He glanced up. "You can sit. You know that thing looks heavy." I sank into the corner of the couch, legs folded underneath, the blanket wrapped tight around my shoulders, my damp hair stuck to my cheek. I pushed it back, fingers shaky from the warmth finally sinking in. Jonah returned silently and handed me a mug. His fingers grazed mine, warm and steady. I looked up. He was watching me. Not smiling, not speaking, just watching. My breath caught without meaning to. I took a sip. The tea was stronger than I expected. Spiced. Grounding. I held the cup in both hands, needing the heat. Marco sat at the edge of the rug, close enough that his knee touched the couch. "You still cold?" he asked. "A little." His hand reached forward and rested lightly on my ankle, just above where my leg disappeared beneath the blanket. His thumb moved once, slow and steady, as if checking for warmth. I didn't pull away. "I brought you this," Eli said behind me. I turned. He was holding a folded shirt. It looked soft, worn, too large. "You'll catch something if you stay in that," he said, voice quiet. I hesitated, glancing down at the damp fabric clinging to my skin. "You can change behind the couch," he offered. "We'll look away." Marco rose and turned toward the fire. Jonah stood and faced the kitchen. I stepped carefully behind the couch, heart pounding harder than it should have for something so simple. The blanket slipped off my shoulders. The wet fabric clung as I peeled it away. I pulled the shirt over my head. The fabric was warm from Eli's hands. It fell past my hips, swallowing my shape. When I stepped out again, they were all seated now, Eli in the armchair, Marco beside him on the rug, and Jonah closest to me, now back on the couch. No one said anything, but their eyes were on me. I sat again, this time with my legs tucked to the side. The hem of the shirt brushed my knees. The tea warmed my chest. Jonah's hand rested on the cushion beside mine, close enough that I could feel the heat of his skin. When my fingers slipped beside his, he didn't move. His pinky touched mine, then stayed. "I guess I should head back soon," I said softly. Eli leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. His voice dropped low. "Or," he said, "you could stay." I didn't move. Jonah's hand was still next to mine, not holding, just resting close. But the space between our fingers had vanished. I shifted slightly, and our palms touched, skin to skin. His thumb grazed mine in a slow, deliberate pass. I didn't pull away. Thunder rumbled outside, low and deep. The storm hadn't let up. If anything, it sounded closer now. Wind pressed against the windows in waves, but the room stayed still. Marco reached from the rug, fingers brushing the edge of the blanket now pulled at my side. He lifted it again, settling it across my lap and tucking the fabric in tighter around my legs. His hand lingered for a beat, his eyes meeting mine as he adjusted the corner at my hip. Then came the sound of Eli rising, the quiet creak of leather beneath him, the soft fall of his boots on the rug. He moved behind the couch. I felt the warmth of his presence before I saw him again. He leaned over me gently, his palms smoothing the fabric of the shirt at my waist. Not pushing, just a single grounding touch. You're going to want to hear what happened next, but before that, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming. Jonah's hand turned under mine, fingers weaving through. The weight of his arm rested along my thigh now, steady and real. He shifted closer, his shoulder brushing mine. I could feel the heat of him everywhere he touched. Marco moved behind me now, his hand lifting strands of my damp hair and brushing them back, slow and careful. His fingertips grazed my neck, then my shoulder as the quilt slipped lower along my collarbone. "I didn't expect this," I whispered. My voice was uneven, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and hunger. "You're not the only one," Marco said softly, close to my ear. Eli's fingers found my wrist, tracing up the inside of my arm until they reached the curve of my elbow. He didn't rush. None of them did. But none of them stepped away either. Jonah leaned in, his forehead brushing my temple. His breath warmed my cheek, then my jaw. My lips parted, but no sound came out. I didn't need to speak anymore. I turned toward him, closer, closer, until our mouths met. It wasn't hesitant. It wasn't unsure. It was breathless and full.